And there it is, the surprising appearance of the Daleks at the end of episode 1. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. I have a British author friend, Rick Hoskin. He's written for the Doctor Who magazine comic strips, he's written for Star Wars, he's written for any number of things, and he's a longtime Doctor Who fan. He often jokes that he wants to write a Doctor Who story with the title, The Surprising Appearance of the Daleks at the end of episode 1, based on Terry Nation's proclivity to do exactly that. Virtually every Dalek story from early on in the series ends the first episode of the story with the Daleks surprisingly appearing and setting the tone for the rest of the story. Now, that kind of misdirection was possible in the early days of Doctor Who because each individual 25-minute episode had its own title, and so the viewers wouldn't necessarily know that they were getting a Dalek story until said surprising appearance of the Daleks. In the modern era, that's much more difficult. Once Doctor Who went to having collective story names with episode numbers instead of individual titles, that kind of misdirection became more difficult because if you had a story called The Day of the Daleks, it's a pretty good guess the Daleks are going to appear in it. But even with that, in the later stories that Terry Nation wrote, the Daleks still would surprisingly appear at the end of the first story. But even so, with the later stories that Terry Nation wrote, the Daleks would still surprisingly appear at the end of episode 1. And so, to that end, I do applaud Russell T Davies for honoring the proud history of the Daleks and their creator, Terry Nation, by setting up the season earlier on with a single Dalek and making it clear that all of the Daleks were completely gone and there would never be another Dalek story. And then to very slyly bring them back in the season finale with a two-partish story that doesn't even have Of the Daleks in the title, and in which the Daleks, once again, surprisingly appear at the end of the first part. That surprise is somewhat spoiled by the fact that in the preview at the end of Boomtown, it actually shows the Daleks, and I don't understand why they did that. That should have been a huge revelatory moment, although I think by that point in the broadcast, that big ending had already been spoiled through media and other inside sources. But still, as much as I dislike Dalek stories in general, I do give major props to Russell T Davies for following the tradition of the series and springing their surprise appearance. So good on that. As for Bad Wolf in general, it's an interesting examination on game show culture and reality television and all of that, of course. And it also mirrors a story structure that was done all the way back in the first Doctor era. If you remember, the first part of that story was the Doctor and companions showing up on a Earth spaceship during the Great Human Diaspora, which the modern series hasn't gotten back to yet, but it will soon enough. But they show up on this generational colonization ship and encounter one set of problems, conclude the apparent story at the halfway point, get back in the TARDIS, and then wind up sometime in the future on the same ship where things have gone dramatically wrong and they have to figure out what happened. Well, the same structure happens here with the earlier story, The Long Game, set on Satellite 5, broadcasting news content to Earth's fourth great and bountiful empire, and the Doctor theoretically sets things right. Now, with Bad Wolf, he arrives back at the same satellite 100 years later and discovers that things have gone terribly, terribly wrong because of the actions he took. Again, it's a clever nod from Russell T Davies. Here he is doing a great balancing act where he's producing a show for a modern audience and specifically targeting viewers who didn't grow up on Doctor Who. He's trying to make it accessible and bring in lots of new viewers. But at the same time, he's dropping little hints and templates and following the DNA of the show and really giving the longtime fans things to latch onto and recognize and appreciate. It's very smart, very sly, very well executed. And it again shows just how brilliant Russell T Davies was bringing this show back for the modern era. behind the scenes during the filming of this story, this is the point where Christopher Eccleston and Russell T Davies almost came to blows. This is where the relationship completely soured. And as I understand it, was the point where Christopher Eccleston definitively decided that he would not be returning for a second series. And that's a real shame. And worse than that, Christopher Eccleston paid a very real price in his career because of that decision. The way the BBC treated him was horrible at the time. And I have a lot of respect for the man for maintaining his ethics and simply keeping his head down and refusing to talk about the situation, simply for the reason that he was not going to make accusations against people in public in a forum where they had no format to defend himself. And so he gets huge points for honor and ethics, but unfortunately, as I say, he paid the price for that, and it's taken him a very, very long time to recover it. Just this spring, his first new Ninth Doctor audio stories from Big Finish are beginning to be released, and it took him the better part of 15 years before deciding to actually return to the show in any capacity. And I think a large part of the reason he was finally willing to do it was because literally all of the people who were involved during his era were long gone, and he was able to finally make his peace with it. I'm really bummed in that I was supposed to meet Christopher Eccleston in person and get his autograph on my inspiration poster last spring at Orlando MegaCon, which was, of course, completely shut down due to the pandemic. I hear that MegaCon is making a big announcement for guests for 2021. They've pushed the convention back to the fall this year, and I am a little bit hopeful that maybe they're going to try and bring back a lot of the people they had booked last time around. If Christopher Eccleston is in the announcement tomorrow, I will be very, very happy. Anyway, I've rambled on enough for one day. Tomorrow I move on to the final episode of Christopher Eccleston's era, and also the foundation of what becomes Torchwood. But I'll get to that tomorrow. I'll see you then.